The vote to wipe out humanity took less than a minute. Far above Neuraxis Prime, the great council citadel floated in silence, shining like a cold jewel in the dark. Inside its highest chamber, 7 rulers from 7 star-born species sat around a circular table of living glass. Colored light moved across the room. Soft machines adjusted heat, air, and gravity for each body seated there. At the center sat Speaker Calyx, the most powerful voice in the Galactic Council. His crystal-like body glimmered as he raised one sharp hand and stopped the room from arguing. "The matter is finished," Calyx said. His voice passed through the translation grid and came out smooth and hard. "Humans are unstable. They send their signals into space without caution. They build weapons faster than treaties. They fight each other more than they cooperate. A species like that does not belong among the stars." Across from him, Admiral Vorak leaned forward in his armored seat. His broad reptilian frame looked built for war. He had broken rebellions, burned worlds, and crushed enemies that had ruled their systems for centuries. His name alone had ended conflicts before they began. "My scouts have watched Earth for nearly 2 of their years," Vorak said. "Humans are divided by borders, flags, religions, and old hatred. They still burn primitive fuels. Their strongest weapons are pointed at each other. They have one weak outpost beyond their planet and treat it like a great victory. They are not a galactic people. They are a future threat." Several council members signaled agreement, but one voice did not. Ambassador Lyra, the council's observer and historian, floated inside a sphere of clear water. Her people valued memory over pride, and unlike the others, she had studied humanity closely. "They are dangerous," Lyra said carefully, "but not for the reason you believe." Calyx turned toward her. "Explain." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Humans survive what should kill them: ice ages, famine, disease, endless war. Again and again they fall apart, and again they rebuild. They are not special because they are peaceful. They are special because pressure changes them." Vorak gave a low laugh. "Pressure breaks primitive species." "Not this one," Lyra replied. "This one becomes sharper." For a moment the chamber grew still. Then Calyx spoke again, colder than before. "And that is exactly why they must be removed now." A feathered counselor lifted one wing. "Their system also controls 3 major resource routes." An energy being flickered in agreement. "Their gas giants alone could fuel entire colonies." The truth settled over the room. Fear was only part of it. Earth was in the way. Lyra saw it and felt dread move through her like ice. "You could offer contact, guidance, membership. We have done it before." Vorak's yellow eyes locked on her. "And risk letting a species like that grow stronger? No. Better to end this while they still think they are alone." Calyx called for the vote. One by one, hands, claws, light signals, and wing marks rose. Only Lyra refused. "The motion passes," Calyx declared. "Admiral Vorak, you will take a fleet to Earth. Demand surrender once. If they refuse, erase them. Let this be a lesson to every violent world still crawling in the dark." Vorak stood, pleased. "How many ships?" Calyx answered without hesitation. 300. Even Vorak smiled at that. When the chamber emptied, Lyra moved beside him one last time. "You think they will kneel," she said softly, "but humans have a saying: necessity creates invention. When they are cornered, they do not become reasonable, they become terrifying." Vorak turned and gave her an open contempt. "Then let them be terrified." 3 days later, 300 warships entered fold space and vanished toward Earth. On the distant blue planet, hidden stations detected the distortion almost at once. Emergency alarms lit up across the world. One classified message was sent to every major capital on Earth. Unknown fleet inbound. Estimated arrival 6 months. And for the first time in generations, humanity stopped arguing long enough to look up together. They believed 6 months would be enough to scare Earth into surrender. They had no idea 6 months was exactly enough time for humanity to become something the galaxy had never faced. For the first time in generations, humanity stopped arguing long enough to look up together. Within hours, emergency aircraft, military convoys, and sealed transports rushed toward Geneva Fortress, a buried command complex beneath the Alps. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, intelligence chiefs, and scientists were brought in under total silence. No press, no public statement, no panic. Not yet. Inside the main chamber, the air felt heavy enough to crush a man's chest. A giant screen showed one thing only, a wall of unknown ships moving toward Earth. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Secretary Elena Ward broke the silence. So this is real? At the far end of the room, General Adrian Cole, commander of Earth Defense Command, stepped forward. His face looked as if he had aged 10 years in a single night. "Yes," he said, "and based on trajectory, formation, and energy readings, this is not first contact. It is an invasion." The room exploded with questions. How many ships? What do they want? Can we talk to them? Can we hide? Cole waited for the noise to die down. Then he gave them the only answer that mattered. They have roughly 6 months before arrival, and if we fight them in a normal war, he paused, we lose. The words dropped into the room like stones. A minister from South America leaned forward. How badly? Cole looked him in the eye. So badly that history would not call it a war, it would call it a slaughter. A few people looked down. One woman began to pray under her breath. Then another voice spoke, cold, calm, precise. "We are asking the wrong question." All heads turned toward Dr. Hana Sato, the physicist many called the sharpest mind on Earth. She stepped toward the display, her dark eyes fixed on the fleet. "The question is not whether we can beat them fairly," she said. "We cannot. The question is whether we are willing to stop fighting fairly." That changed the room. Some people straightened, others looked disturbed. Dr. Sato touched the screen, and images appeared. Old wars, ruined cities, resistance movements, sabotage campaigns, cyber attacks, biological containment labs, orbital projections. "For thousands of years," she said, "human beings have studied one thing better than almost anything else. Not peace, not wisdom, war. Dirty war, slow war, total war, survival war." A general from India crossed his arms. "You are suggesting asymmetrical defense." "I am suggesting," Sato replied, "that we stop thinking like a weaker army and start thinking like a species facing extinction." From the military row, Colonel Miriam Okoye stood up. Her voice was steady, but there was heat in it. "If they're coming to negotiate, they would have sent a message first. If they're bringing that many ships, they do not fear us. Good. That gives us our only real advantage." "And what is that?" asked Secretary Ward. Colonel Okoye answered without blinking. "They do not know how far humans will go when the alternative is death." The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different, harder, more focused. General Cole slowly turned back to the world leaders. Borders no longer matter. Old disputes no longer matter. From this moment, every factory, every lab,
Every launch site and every intelligence network and every soldier on this planet answers one question only. He looked up at the fleet on the screen. How do we make them regret coming here? No one objected. No one asked for peace talks again. One by one, leaders who had spent decades distrusting each other gave their approval. In that buried room under the Alps, humanity made its choice. Not to surrender, not to beg, to prepare. And once that decision was made, the entire planet began to change. In the next 90 days, Earth would stop being just a world. It would become a trap.
In the next 90 days, Earth stopped being just a world. It became a machine built for survival. The order moved faster than anything in human history. Civilian factories changed their lines in a matter of days. Car plants began producing armored drone shells. Electronics companies stopped making consumer devices and started building guidance systems, hardened servers, and battlefield networks. Freight airports became military hubs. Deep water ports filled with sealed cargo moving under armed guard. No government argued over cost. No one asked who would own the patents. That age was over. At Geneva Fortress, the command center never slept. Screens tracked supply routes, energy use, satellite coverage, food reserves, underground shelters, orbital launch windows, and a growing list of weapons projects. The room looked less like a war office and more like the brain of a planet trying to rewire itself before death arrived. General Adrian Cole stood at the center of it all, giving orders in short bursts, rarely sitting, almost never blinking long enough to rest. Move lithium reserves east, shift the launch schedule, merge those labs, forget national clearance, I want results. Around him, uniforms from dozens of countries mixed together without ceremony. Men and women who had trained their whole lives to protect one flag were now building something larger and colder, a species-level defense. Dr. Hana Sato led the science wing from a sealed lab 3 levels below the main chamber. She was given one question and endless resources. What works against an enemy with better ships, better shields, and better weapons? Her first answer was brutal. Then we do not aim for better, she told the World Council over a secure line. We aim for unexpected. Project after project was approved. Swarm drones, orbital mines, sensor ghosts, hardened lunar launch tubes, AI-managed decoy fleets, kinetic strike systems built from mining hardware, Mars relay stations converted into long-range disruption platforms. Old satellites were pulled from graveyard orbit and turned into guided collision weapons. Nothing was too strange. Nothing was rejected because it sounded cruel. Every idea was judged by one standard only. Could it hurt the fleet? Colonel Miriam Okoye took charge of the ground response. She knew something many leaders did not want to admit. If the invaders reached Earth's surface, cities would not be defended like cities. They would be turned into wounds, waiting to close around the enemy. She oversaw training programs that spread across continents, not just for soldiers, but for engineers, medics, transport crews, tunnel teams, signal runners, drone operators, and ordinary civilians who refused to wait helplessly for the sky to fall. Do not think like an army, she told one packed training hall in Lagos. Think like the ground beneath their feet. Think like the wall beside them. Think like the silence before the blast. People listened, and more than that, they changed. In public, the world was told only that a global emergency had begun. The truth was kept inside hardened rooms and encrypted channels. But even without full details, people could feel the shift. Streets were quieter. Children were moved inland.
Hospitals cleared entire wings. Schools taught emergency drills beside mathematics. Farmers were given sealed instructions. Pilots signed papers they were not allowed to discuss with their families. Humanity had not become fearless, it had become focused. Late one night, as rain hit the mountain above Geneva Fortress, Secretary Elena Ward stood beside General Cole and looked at the glowing map of Earth. "Tell me the truth," she said softly. "Do you think this will be enough?" Cole did not answer at once. Then he said, "Enough to win? I don't know." He looked at the incoming line that marked the alien fleet's path through the dark. "But enough to make them bleed?" He nodded once. "Yes." And somewhere beyond Jupiter's distant orbit, the invaders kept coming, still believing Earth was soft, divided, and afraid. They were about to learn the most dangerous mistake in war. Sometimes the weaker side is not trying to survive the battle. Sometimes it is trying to make sure the enemy never recovers from it.
Sometimes the weaker side is not trying to survive the battle. Sometimes it is trying to make sure the enemy never recovers from it. That idea became the center of every decision made inside Geneva Fortress. By day 94, the War Council had stopped asking what was acceptable. Now they asked only what was necessary. In a sealed chamber far below the mountain, Dr. Hana Sato stood before a wall of projections and gave the kind of presentation that no civilization should ever need. Around her sat presidents, defense ministers, intelligence chiefs, and the last people on Earth still trying to measure morality while the clock kept moving. "We have reached the final stage," she said. "Conventional delay tactics are in place, orbital disruption platforms are nearly ready, drone saturation plans are on schedule. But if we want the alien fleet to lose more than ships, we need weapons that travel through weakness, not armor." A cold silence settled over the room. Sato touched the screen. A new symbol appeared. Project Black Snow. "We recovered trace biological and chemical material from 2 surveillance probes that fell into our atmosphere last year," she said. "It gave us enough to build a targeted chain agent, not a normal disease, something smaller, faster, designed to move through damaged ship systems, air recyclers, and shared transport lines. It will not destroy machinery, it will destroy crews." Several faces changed at once. Secretary Elena Ward looked at the projection for a long moment. "If this is released," she said quietly, "there is no taking it back." "No, there isn't," replied Sato. A minister from Brazil spoke next. "Then we become the thing history will hate." General Adrian Cole answered before anyone else could. "If history survives, it can hate us later." No one argued with that. Colonel Miriam Okoye leaned forward, arms locked, eyes hard. "They crossed the line first when they came here with 300 warships and no attempt to speak. We are not choosing between good and evil anymore. We are choosing between survival and burial." The room stayed still. Then Sato moved to the next files. Project Lantern, autonomous colony arcs carrying human embryos, genetic archives, culture records, and machine-guided education systems. If Earth died, humanity would not end with it. Project Scorched Harbor, a final denial system buried deep in planetary infrastructure. If Earth was lost, the enemy would inherit nothing worth taking. Project Iron Veil, millions of low-cost attack drones hidden across orbit, the Moon, Mars, and the asteroid belt. Every plan had the same message beneath it. If humanity could not win cleanly, then humanity would make victory too expensive for anyone else. When the session ended, approvals moved through the system in minutes. Labs received unlimited clearance, military ethics boards were frozen. Private industry vanished into state command almost overnight. Cargo trains moved only at night. Entire research campuses disappeared behind armed fences and blackout walls.
Outside the bunker, ordinary people felt the world changing, even if they did not know why. Store shelves emptied, then refilled with ration packs. Schools became shelter sites. Stadiums became drone assembly plants. Artists painted murals that said nothing directly, yet everyone understood them. Hold the line. Stay ready. Stay human. Late that night, Ward found Sato alone in the lab corridor, staring through reinforced glass at rows of sealed containment units. "Do you ever wonder what happens if we survive this?" Ward asked. Sato did not turn. "Yes," she said. "I wonder whether the people who survive will still recognize themselves." Then a warning tone cut through the hall. A new deep space report had arrived. The alien fleet had increased speed. Their arrival window had just moved closer. Humanity had been racing against time. Now, time had just started running faster. Humanity had been racing against time. Now, time had started running faster. The new calculations hit Geneva Fortress like a punch. The alien fleet was no longer following its earlier approach curve. They had changed formation, burned more power, and cut valuable weeks from Earth's preparation window. What had once looked like a long countdown now felt like a door slamming shut. Inside the command center, every screen changed at once. Updated intercept paths, revised launch schedules, emergency manufacturing targets, projected casualty ranges. General Adrian Cole stood in front of the main table, one hand pressed against the edge as officers rushed new data around him. "How much time?" Secretary Elena Ward asked. "Not enough," Cole said. "That is not a number." He looked at her, tired and sharp at the same time. 4 months, maybe a little less if they push harder. No one in the room moved for a second. Then everything started moving at once. Orders rolled out across the planet within minutes. Shuttle launches that had been planned for next month were moved to next week. Prototype weapons were cleared for battlefield use without long testing cycles. Reserve bunkers were opened. Deep shelters were stocked. Transport networks were stripped of civilian comfort and turned into war arteries. On the Moon, hidden launch tubes began loading faster than crews could safely manage. On Mars, engineers slept in their suits beside power arrays they were converting into long-range interference cannons. In the asteroid belt, automated mining platforms stopped digging for ore and started shaping metal and rock into guided weapons. Dr. Hana Sato barely left her lab. Project Black Snow had entered final containment tests. One failure could poison Earth itself. One success could cripple an enemy fleet from the inside. She watched simulation after simulation run across the glass in front of her, her face pale from lack of sleep. A young researcher beside her whispered, "Do you think we still have a line we won't cross?" Sato kept watching the numbers. "I think," she said quietly, "the line crossed us first." Elsewhere, Colonel Miriam Okoye moved through training sites like a storm. She visited underground rail tunnels in Europe, flood control kill zones in South Asia, mountain defense cells in South America, and urban trap grids in Africa. She did not waste words. "They will expect armies," she told one room of volunteers in Sao Paulo. "Do not give them armies. They will expect fear. Do not give them fear. Make them feel lost every minute they stand on this planet." The volunteers listened with faces tight and serious. Some were soldiers, many were not. Teachers, drivers, coders, electricians, surgeons, students. People who had planned for normal futures and now found themselves learning how to turn roads, towers, and tunnels into weapons. For weeks the truth had been hidden from the public in fragments. Now that ended. A unified broadcast went live in every country, on every screen, in every language. Secretary Ward appeared first. No flags, no ceremony, just a tired woman telling the species the truth. We are not alone, and they are coming here in force. There was no panic in her voice. That made it worse. She explained only what people needed to know. An unknown fleet, limited time, global mobilization, mandatory cooperation. Survival would depend on discipline, trust, and sacrifice. Then General Cole spoke. "We do not promise victory," he said. "We promise resistance." And after him came something no one expected. Messages from ordinary people began to flood the networks. Doctors offering service, pilots volunteering for one-way missions, farmers giving land for launch sites, engineers submitting desperate ideas at all hours, parents recording messages for children not because they had given up, but because they were preparing to fight anyway. The world did not collapse after the truth. It hardened. The invaders thought Earth was running out of time. What they did not understand was this: the closer they came, the less human beings cared about what was forbidden.
The closer they came, the less human beings cared about what was forbidden. That was the real turning point. Not when the fleet was detected, not when the first emergency meeting began. It happened when Earth accepted one brutal truth: no one was coming to save them. There would be no miracle, no hidden ally, no peaceful misunderstanding at the last moment. If humanity wanted a future, humanity would have to build it with trembling hands and terrible choices. From that day on, hesitation began to die. In the deepest levels of Geneva Fortress, Project Black Snow moved into sealed production. Dr. Hana Sato watched the first stable batch take form behind layers of reinforced glass. It looked harmless, almost beautiful, a pale drift of particles held inside a field chamber, quiet and weightless. A weapon so small it could pass through filters, a weapon so cruel it could turn a ship into a grave. One of the senior biologists beside her removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "If we use this," he said, "there will be no clean version of history left." Sato did not look away from the chamber. "There was never going to be a clean version," she said, "only a living one or a dead one." Above them, the rest of the planet changed shape faster every week. Consumer industries were gone now. Luxury vanished. Entertainment slowed to a shadow. Cities dimmed at night to save power for defense grids, underground foundries, orbital elevators, and lunar batteries. Every resource had a destination. Every destination had one purpose: war. Colonel Miriam Okoye expanded the civilian resistance model into something larger than any army. Neighborhood maps were redrawn. Utility lines were rigged for overload. Subway systems were turned into hidden movement corridors. High-rises were quietly reinforced in some places and weakened in others. Entire districts became silent puzzles designed to confuse and kill anything that entered without local guidance. She stood before a room full of volunteer coordinators in Nairobi and spoke without raising her voice. "If they land in your city, do not think of defense as a line. Think of it as layers: confusion, delay, pressure, loss. Every hour you steal from them is another hour Earth survives." The room stayed still. Then everyone nodded. Meanwhile, General Adrian Cole approved something that would have once ended careers across the world. He gave final clearance to Earth's denial protocols. If the planet could not be held, the invaders would not inherit its industry, oceans, orbit, or core infrastructure intact. Humanity would burn its own future before handing it over. When Secretary Elena Ward read the document, her hand trembled. "This means we are planning for our own death," she said. Cole answered quietly, "No, we are planning to deny them victory." As the final weeks approached, humanity sent one last broad transmission into deep space. Not a surrender offer, not a plea for mercy,
Not diplomacy, just a message. Simple, direct, human. We are waiting. The signal went out in every major language on Earth, then in mathematics, then in encoded pulse patterns, then in raw radio noise blasted from every transmitter the planet had. And on the far edge of the solar system, Admiral Vorak received it. He listened once, then again, and for the first time since leaving Council space, he felt something cold move under his scales. Not fear, not yet, but the first warning of it. Hours later, the alien fleet crossed into the outer reaches of the system, and every trap humanity had buried in the dark began to wake. Hours later, the alien fleet crossed into the outer reaches of the system, and every trap humanity had buried in the dark began to wake up. At first, Admiral Vorak saw nothing unusual. His 300 warships moved in disciplined formation through the black, their shields low but ready, their weapons banks warm, their sensor webs reaching ahead toward the distant light of Earth's star. On his main display, the human system looked almost quiet. A few weak signals, civilian noise, scattered satellites. Nothing that matched the fear Ambassador Lyra had tried to place in his mind. He stood from his command seat and studied the tactical projection. "No fleet," he said. His sensor officer flicked through scan layers. "No organized orbital defense, Admiral. No heavy battle stations, no massed ship formation. Their deep space profile is still primitive." Vorak gave a slow, satisfied breath, as expected. But not everyone on the bridge shared his ease. A younger officer near the secondary display frowned. "Sir, there are sensor shadows near the gas giant." Vorak turned. "Explain." "We are reading distortion fields in the radiation belts around the largest planet. It could be natural interference, but the pattern repeats." Vorak walked closer to the display. The giant world filled part of the screen, striped and vast, wrapped in storms bigger than continents. Around it, the data shimmered with static and broken returns. "Could the humans be hiding assets there?" he asked. The officer hesitated. "If they are using the planet's radiation to mask them." Vorak's jaw tightened for a moment. Then he waved it away. "Primitive improvisation. Keep formation. Increase scanning. We do not slow for ghosts." The fleet pressed inward. Far away, inside Geneva Fortress, Earth Command tracked every movement. General Adrian Cole stood in the dark command hall with Colonel Miriam Okoye beside him. No one spoke loudly. The room had gone beyond panic weeks ago. Now it was all numbers, timing, and pressure. "Outer trigger line crossed," an operations officer said. Cole nodded once. "Begin Phase 1. The command went out through buried cables, relay satellites, lunar transmitters, and silent machine networks hidden across the system. Near the gas giant, thousands of dormant devices opened their eyes. They were not warships. They were not even advanced by alien standards. They were small, cheap, ugly things, metal shells packed with engines, guidance chips, and shaped mass, built fast, built in secret, built to die. On Vorak's bridge, alarms suddenly flashed. "Multiple contacts," the sensor officer shouted. "No, thousands! No, thousands! Emerging from the radiation field." The tactical display filled with red. Vorak stepped forward so hard his claws struck the deck. "What are they?" Before anyone could answer, the first wave accelerated. They did not form neat lines. They did not act like trained fighters. They came in wild swarms, breaking apart, joining again, some too small to target cleanly, others broadcasting false engine signatures to confuse defensive systems. "Point defense, engage!" Blue fire erupted from the alien ships. Hundreds of human machines vanished at once, but more kept coming. And mixed in among them were larger shapes, cold chunks of rock fitted with crude drives, pushed into attack paths weeks earlier and guided only in the final moments. Vorak stared in disbelief. Are they throwing asteroids at us? One of the rocks slammed into the shield of an outer escort ship. The shield held for half a second. Then it burst. The impact tore through the hull and split the vessel open in silence. The first alien ship died before Earth had even spoken a word. On the bridge, no one moved. Then a second alarm screamed. More contacts were rising behind the first wave. Vorak had expected Earth to defend itself like a civilization. He was about to learn that humanity had chosen to fight like a cornered species instead.
Vorak had expected Earth to defend itself like a civilization. He was about to learn that humanity had chosen to fight like a cornered species instead. The second wave did not come from the gas giant. It came from everywhere else. Contacts flashed across the alien tactical grid, above, below, behind, and far off to the flank. Some were real, some were false. Some moved like ships, others moved like broken debris. Human decoys flooded the sensors with fake engine patterns, false heat trails, and ghost formations. In a matter of seconds, Vorak's clean battlefield turned into noise. "Sort the targets!" he shouted. "We are trying, Admiral." Another escort ship vanished in a white burst as a guided mass struck its weakened shield. A third lost propulsion and drifted hard out of formation. Point defense guns tore hundreds of human drones apart, but the drones kept coming in waves so dense they looked like black weather moving through space. Vorak slammed one claw against the command rail. "Tighten formation, raise shield density, burn through the swarm." The fleet obeyed. It was the correct military response. It was also exactly what humanity wanted. Back near the moon, hidden charges buried months earlier detonated in a careful chain. But Earth did not shatter the moon completely. That would have been madness even for them. Instead, human engineers had carved parts of its scarred surface into a weapon. Massive plates of rock, metal, and buried tungsten rods were launched outward in controlled bursts, hurled into the exact path where Vorak's ships were now regrouping. The warning came too late. "Debris spread incoming!" The alien fleet turned, but not fast enough. The field hit like a storm of hammers. Shards the size of buildings smashed into shields. Smaller pieces slipped through weak points and tore armor open. One cruiser lost its entire left side. Another spun out of line with fires burning along its spine. A troop carrier took 3 impacts in less than a second and burst open, scattering bodies and machinery into the void. On Earth, no one cheered. In Geneva Fortress, General Cole only said, "Now." Colonel Okoye gave the next order, and the third wave began. Thousands of compact drones rose from hidden launch racks in lunar shadow and from silent bays buried inside dead satellites. They moved straight toward the damaged alien ships. Their engines were weak, their armor was almost nothing, their explosive yield was low. That was why Vorak underestimated them. "Let the crippled ships handle it," he snapped. "Do not waste heavy batteries on scraps." The drones reached the broken hulls. Then, instead of exploding, many of them attached. A bridge officer turned pale. "Admiral, they are breaching vents, service ducts, coolant lines." Vorak's eyes narrowed. "For boarding?" "No, sir." He was still staring at the screen when reports began arriving from the first damaged cruiser. Crew collapse in Section 4, respiratory failure and engineering, skin lesions, internal bleeding, nervous system shock.
On Earth, Dr. Hana Sato watched the infection model light up with cold precision. Project Black Snow had entered the enemy fleet. It moved through air systems, maintenance channels, transport locks, and shared equipment. It did not care about rank. It did not care about armor. It only cared that living bodies were trapped together inside steel. Vorak felt the shape of the battle changing under him. This was no longer a simple punishment campaign. It was becoming contamination, confusion, pressure from all sides. "Pull the infected ships back," he ordered. "Seal all transfers. Cut internal movement. Medical quarantine now." But already support craft had moved between vessels, repair teams had crossed docking tubes, cargo had been transferred, air systems had been opened. The infection was no longer trapped. And for the first time in his long career, Admiral Vorak understood something with perfect clarity. The humans were not trying to defeat his fleet with superior force. They were trying to poison the idea of victory itself. As the first infected ships drifted away, Mars woke up in the distance, and the next human strike was aimed not at alien bodies, but at their eyes, their signals, and their trust in each other.
As the first infected ships drifted away, Mars woke up in the distance, and the next human strike was aimed not at alien bodies, but at their eyes, their signals, and their trust in each other. From the red planet's hardened colonies, long arrays that had once powered mining operations turned as one. For months, engineers had quietly rebuilt them into focused disruption cannons. They were crude compared to alien weapons. They were ugly, unstable, and dangerous to fire at full strength. They were also enough. The beams crossed space in silence. When they hit the alien formation, they did not tear through hulls or burn ships apart. Instead, they hit the systems that made order possible. Sensors glitched, communications jumped with static, guidance matrices lost lock for crucial seconds. Shared tactical maps began showing different pictures on different bridges. On Admiral Vorak's flagship, the central display flickered. "Report. Interference from the fourth planet," an officer said, fighting to steady his voice. "High-energy disruption. We are losing clean readings. Compensate." "We are trying." But compensation was exactly what Earth had planned for. The false signals began a second later. Thousands of them. Ghost fleets, phantom engines, fake attack paths, heat blooms where nothing existed, empty sectors that suddenly appeared crowded sectors that looked clear. Human decoy systems mixed with Martian interference turned the tactical grid into a lie. Vorak stared at the display and felt anger give way to something worse: uncertainty. "Filter for physical mass only," he snapped. "We do that, Admiral, and we lose the smaller drones. Then filter for active thrust. We do that and the drifting weapons vanish." Every answer created another blind spot. Then one of his outer cruisers fired. A bright lance crossed the darkness and struck a ship from Vorak's own line. For one terrible moment, no one on the bridge understood what had happened. Then another ship fired, and another. "Countermand those launches. They believe they are under attack from infiltrators. Override them." "Overrides are not sinking, Admiral." The interference was not enough to fully control the alien fleet. Humanity knew that. It only needed to do something much simpler. It needed to make the fleet doubt itself. In Geneva Fortress, General Adrian Cole watched the confusion spread across the enemy formation. Beside him, Colonel Miriam Okoye folded her arms and said nothing. The room around them was tense but focused. No one smiled. Too many people had already died for triumph to feel clean. Dr. Hana Sato's voice came through the secure channel from her lab. "Black Snow transmission rate is climbing. Medical traffic between their ships has increased." Cole nodded once. "They're helping us spread it." Out in space, Vorak's fleet was no longer moving like one blade. It was becoming fragments.
Tight formations loosened, damaged ships tried to fall back, medical vessels broke pattern, escorts shifted to cover the wrong threats. Every correction opened another weakness, and hidden inside that disorder came the next human move. A narrow craft, little more than an engine wrapped around armor and code, slipped through the false returns. It was piloted by Darien Volkov, once a civilian transport flyer, now wired into a combat frame so deeply that his ship answered almost as quickly as thought. He came in low, buried inside a cloud of dead drones and broken signal echoes. His target was not a gun platform. It was an alien command carrier. "Approach window open," he transmitted. Earth Command answered with silence for 1 second too long. Then Cole's voice came through. "Proceed." Volkov's hands tightened once on the controls. He knew this was one way. He kept flying. The alien fleet was still stronger, still larger, still more advanced. But in the next few minutes, one human pilot was about to tear open the center of that strength and show the whole fleet what panic really looked like.
The alien fleet was still stronger, still larger, still more advanced. But in the next few minutes, one human pilot was about to tear open the center of that strength and show the whole fleet what panic really looked like. Darien Volkov flew straight into the storm. His craft was small enough to disappear inside the mess of broken drones, drifting metal, and false sensor ghosts. Around him, the battlefield flashed with weapons fire and dying ships. Warning lights filled his cockpit. Static hissed in his ears. The command carrier ahead looked enormous, a moving fortress wrapped in shields and escort fire. He kept going. "Distance?" General Cole asked from Geneva Fortress. A tracking officer answered at once. "Closing fast." Colonel Miriam Okoye stood behind the tactical display, her jaw tight. "If he gets close enough, the package goes in. If not, we lose the chance." In his cockpit, Volkov could hear his own breathing. Nothing else felt real now. Not fear, not glory, only the target. A burst of alien fire sliced past him and tore apart 3 dead drones drifting at his side. His craft shook violently. One of his side panels went dark. "Minor control loss," he said through clenched teeth. "Still on approach." The command carrier had seen him now. Its outer guns turned. A wall of light came toward him. Volkov dropped low, rolled through a cloud of debris, then cut thrust for half a second. His ship vanished from one scan angle, reappeared on another, and slid beneath the carrier's main defense arc. He had seconds, no more. "Target lock," he whispered. On Earth, a secured terminal opened. Dr. Hana Sato entered the final command herself. Inside Volkov's ship was not a bomb in the normal sense. It was something quieter and, in some ways, worse. A warfare package built from malicious code, false commands, signal corruption, and friend or foe inversion logic. If it reached the carrier's systems, it would not destroy the fleet outright. It would make the fleet stop trusting itself. Volkov's voice came one last time. "Tell my brother I did not run." Then he rammed the craft into the command carrier's outer shield gap just as the defense field shifted to recharge. The impact was small compared to the explosions already burning across the battle. But it was enough. The package entered. For 3 seconds, nothing changed. Then the carrier's signal array flickered. On alien bridges across the fleet, identification systems began to fail. Target markers jumped. Command priority streams rewrote themselves. Some ships vanished from the fleet map. Others appeared as hostile signatures. Defensive systems received corrupted orders. Automated guns turned toward the nearest threat, sometimes an enemy, sometimes a friend. Admiral Vorak stared at the display in disbelief. "What is happening?"
His tactical officer was nearly shouting now. "Command routing failure! Fleet authentication corrupted! Some ships are reading Allied vessels as attackers!" A cruiser to the right of the flagship opened fire on its own escort line. Another ship launched interceptor swarms at a medical transport. 2 destroyers collided while trying to evade threats that did not exist. The formation broke. Not cracked, broke. In Geneva Fortress, no one cheered, but something changed in the room. For the first time since the invasion began, the alien fleet did not look unstoppable. It looked wounded. General Cole lowered his head for one brief second after Volkov's signal vanished from the screen. Then he looked up. He said, "Press them." And all across the solar system, hidden human systems prepared to strike again. Vorak's fleet was sick, blind, and turning on itself, and that was the exact moment Dr. Sato gave the order she had feared most.
Vorak's fleet was sick, blind, and turning on itself, and that was the exact moment Dr. Sato gave the order she had feared most. In the sealed command chamber beneath Geneva Fortress, no one spoke when her hand moved over the final control. For weeks she had delayed this moment. She had argued for timing, for distance, for containment, for one more round of data. But the battle above had crossed the point where caution still meant anything. Black snow had already entered the fleet. The command carrier had been corrupted. The alien formation was breaking apart. If Earth was going to end this invasion, it had to strike while the enemy was off balance. "Confirm release window," she said. A technician answered with a dry mouth and shaking hands. "Window is stable." General Adrian Cole looked at her through the glass partition. "Once this starts, we can't call it back." "I know," Sato replied. Then she activated Project Pale Tide. Unlike Black Snow, Pale Tide had never been designed for one biology. That was what made it so dangerous. It was an adaptive microagent, built to study, change, and spread through any complex living system it encountered. On paper, it was not elegant. In practice, it was a nightmare. Released from high-altitude dispersal platforms and carried outward by tailored delivery shells, it moved toward the closest damaged ships first. Their filters were already strained, their crews were already weakened, their medical systems were already overloaded. Pale Tide entered like smoke. On Admiral Vorak's flagship, the first reports came in within minutes. Medical sectors are failing. Unknown contamination on 3 carriers. Infected personnel are not responding to treatment. Then the stream became worse. It has crossed ship classes. Containment teams are collapsing. Life support circulation may be helping it spread. Vorak felt the bridge closing in around him. This was no longer battle in any form he respected. This was erosion, rot, collapse from inside. His ships were being blinded, infected, split apart, and hunted all at once. Every response came too late. Every clean solution had already been dirtied by human hands. He turned to the command display and saw the truth in a single glance. Destroyed ships, drifting ships, ships firing on allies, ships gone silent, ships pulling away without orders. The perfect invasion force he had led toward Earth no longer looked like an army. It looked like wreckage still trying to remember its shape. "Admiral?" his communications officer asked, voice breaking. "What are your orders?" Vorak stood still for a long second. Pride told him to stay. Training told him to regroup. But survival, cold and undeniable, told him something else. "Transmit to all remaining vessels," he said. "Emergency withdrawal. Full retreat vector. Any ship that can still move leaves now." The bridge went silent. One officer stared at him as if he had spoken a language no one had heard before. "Admiral, that is an order." Outside, the fleet began to peel away in fragments. Not in triumph, not in discipline, in desperation. Ships broke formation and burned for distance. Some escaped, some did not. Human drones followed them like insects around wounded animals. Mars continued to blind them. Infection reports kept rising. 2 more cruisers collided while trying to withdraw through false navigational paths. Then Vorak sent one final transmission to the Galactic Council. His voice, once heavy with certainty, sounded scraped hollow. Earth is not a weak world. Humanity is not a primitive species. They weaponize loss. They weaponize fear. They weaponize themselves. If the Council sends another fleet here, it will not be a conquest. It will be a graveyard. And as that message crossed the stars, the Council finally heard the truth too late. The species they came to erase had just forced the galaxy's strongest fleet to run.
And as that message crossed the stars, the Council finally heard the truth too late. The species they had come to erase had just forced the galaxy's strongest fleet to run. Inside the Council chamber above Neuraxis Prime, no one spoke when Admiral Vorak's transmission ended. The room that had once felt full of certainty now felt small. Speaker Calyx stood frozen at the center platform, his crystal body dimmer than before. Around him, the other Council members stared at the casualty reports, the infection models, the wreckage patterns, and the retreat routes of a fleet that had left with absolute confidence and returned broken. One of the military delegates finally found his voice. This cannot be the final outcome, but it was. Ambassador Lyra floated silently inside her sphere, watching them all. She did not look proud. She did not look satisfied. She looked tired. "I warned you," she said at last. "You saw division and mistook it for weakness. You saw conflict and mistook it for incompetence. You saw a young species and assumed youth meant helplessness." Calyx turned toward her, but there was no force left in him now. "What do you propose?" Lyra answered without hesitation. "End this, now, before fear makes you more foolish than pride already has." Far away, in Geneva Fortress, Earth watched the alien fleet retreat deeper into space. No one celebrated wildly. The cost had been too high for that. Cities were scarred. Orbit was filled with drifting metal. Hospitals overflowed. Too many names had already been added to the dead. Secretary Elena Ward stood in the command center beside General Adrian Cole and Dr. Hana Sato. The battle map no longer showed an enemy closing in. It showed distance growing, slowly, almost reluctantly. "They're really leaving," Ward said. Cole nodded once. Yes, but his face did not soften. He had already learned that survival and peace were not the same thing. Within hours, a transmission came from the Council itself. For the first time, it carried no threat, only terms. A full ceasefire, recognition of Earth as a sovereign world, withdrawal of all hostile forces, and an offer, carefully worded, almost embarrassed, for diplomatic relations. Ward read the message in silence. Then she handed it to Cole. "What do you think?" she asked. Cole looked at it for a long moment. "I think they are afraid." Dr. Sato, pale from exhaustion, spoke quietly. "Good. Fear may be the only language they understand now." The negotiations that followed were slow and tense. Humanity demanded guarantees, independent monitoring, and recognition not as a protected species, but as an equal power. This time, the Council agreed. They had seen what happened when they treated Earth like prey. Years later, the chamber above Neuraxis Prime looked almost the same. Almost. There was now an 8th seat. At that seat sat Ambassador Adrian Cole, older, harder, marked by the war, but still steady. Across from him sat the same species that had once voted to erase his world. Lyra, now the Council's new speaker,
opened the session with calm authority. Trade routes were discussed, border disputes were reviewed, relief missions were approved, and every so often, silence would pass through the chamber when someone remembered how close all of this had come to never existing at all. Humanity had not won because it was stronger. It had won because it refused to die quietly. And from that day forward, the galaxy understood one lesson it would never forget. You could threaten Earth, you could underestimate humans, but if you pushed them to the edge, they would become the most dangerous thing in the stars, a species with nothing left to lose and every reason to endure. And that was how humanity entered the galaxy, not as victims, not as beggars, but as survivors the stars would never again mistake for weak. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.